Hi everyone, this is Thomas King, and today I would like to bring you lesson 2C in the Tnk64 chess course, by which I'm referring to the pin. Okay, so in the previous lecture we looked at forks. Okay, so in a fork we double attacked. Well, in a pin, instead of trying to attack 2 times at once, what we do is we try to attack one so that it can't be defended. So what do we mean by that? Well, a pin is when a long-range piece, a bishop, rook, or queen, they're called long-range because they can move as far as they want without being obstructed by their own pieces, attacks one piece such that it can't move along a rank or diagonal, or along a rank, file, or diagonal. Let's take a look at this here. In this position here, objectively, it should be drawn. Black should just be able to exchange off his rook for one of White's bishops, after which White will be left with only a king and bishop, and the game would be a draw. So, but it should be noted that White is the only one with any real chances to win here. Even then, with correct play from a similar position, not exactly this one, but from a similar position, this would be a trivial draw. But here, Black is actually, in fact, lost. Because what we do is we use the pin. White plays the move bishop to c4. And here what we see is that this bishop controls this diagonal, the a2 g8 diagonal, which I've highlighted in green squares. Now on this diagonal we have a rook and we have a king. Now we know that we can't move a piece. We can't make a move such that it places the king in check, i.e. we can't make a move that leaves us in a position such that they can take our king. If we do that, that's an illegal move. So what this means is that the black rook, if it is to move, say for example, if we move it to d7, the bishop's view of the king via the a2 g8 diagonal is blocked. This would be check. As such, it's an illegal move. The rook can't move, or else a more valuable piece, the king, will be lost. And that's what we mean when we say the pin. When a bishop, rook, or queen attacks a piece along a rank, file, or diagonal such that it can't move without more material being lost, or can't move, period. Okay, and we have two types of pins. This type we see here is an absolute pin. Why? Because the rook can only move along files and ranks, and when being attacked along a diagonal, it can't move. It's called an absolute pin because this rook is totally paralyzed. It has nothing it can do. But there's also such thing as a relative pin, and we'll look at a few of those a bit later. But the pin is a powerful resource. And in this case, after bishop d5, Black doesn't want to lose, he has to play king e6, or else it's going to take the rook, and we'll be left with two bishops versus a king, and that's a win for White. But after king e4, we use superior force. This rook is pinned. We have a saying in chess, pin and win, and that is because the rook can't move, there's nothing it can do once it's being attacked, or you can just continue to defend it. But in the absence of any more pieces to defend it, this rook's going to fall, White's going to win the game. Okay, so on to the next example. Save and continue. Now, when a lot of people start playing chess, they look for checks. People just assume checks are good. I mean, they're forcing moves, right? And they can be good. In fact, they can be fantastic. A lot of forced mating patterns start with a check, and that is because they are forcing moves. Forcing moves are tactical landmines. We'll talk about them a bit later. However, in the words of Bobby Fischer, you're only a bad player if you see a check and play it. And according to Bobby Fischer's definition, when playing Queen d6 check, black must be one of the very few bad players around. Playing as white, how would you refute this? Well, if you found the move rook to d3, you're absolutely spot on. The queen is in a relative pin. The previous example was an absolute pin. This is a relative pin. Why? Well, this is a relative pin as opposed to an absolute pin because the queen's mobility, though severely restricted, it can no longer move along the diagonals. It can no longer move along the 6th rank. But it still can move along this file. Because this rook controls this file, and the queen can still move along it without exposing the king. It's a relative pin, not an absolute pin. Nonetheless, it doesn't really matter. Either way, this queen's going to fall, white's going to have a winning ending. So that's an example of a relative pin. Let's go on to the next example. A good example of a pin in the opening arises after the Scandinavian defense. As a beginner, which I assume you are watching this video, I wouldn't recommend this. It violates an opening principle, and we'll learn about them a bit later. In other words, black's developing the queen too early, where it can be attacked with tempo. White develops a piece with tempo in the main line, knight c3. Now, beginner players might say queen to c6 here. The best move is queen to a5, and a lot of strong players will play this as black. It's not the best move. It's not arguably the best variation for black, but it is not a bad one. Queen c6 is a bad move. Now, what we see here is that this queen on c6 is on the same diagonal as this king on e8. This a4 e8 diagonal is weak. If we could get a bishop or queen there, the queen would be pinned. So, how as white do you exploit this? Well, what we see is that this knight defends the b5 square. And if we could get a bishop to b5, that'd be great. And we can do just that. Bishop to b5, the queen's lost, it's game over, black should resign here. Okay? Another example of an interesting pin arises from the Spanish opening. This move, knight f6, is known as the Berlin variation. It's a perfectly fine variation as black. Castles, and here white's threatening to win a pawn. It's worth noting here that black can't win a pawn with knight takes f6 because of, you guessed it, rook e1. White places black in a pin. If the knight moves, then the e5 pawn falls. And if d5, then we should attack the pin piece with d3. So, here black thinks a6. His idea is that he wants the bishop to move, and he thinks that after bishop takes, d takes, he has the bishop pair. But white thinks better. He takes on e5. Now, here black thinks he can just get the pawn back with queen d4. He's forking, as we saw in the previous example. However, as usual, white knows better. Knight f3. White is clearing this rank and attacking the queen. So, here, black wins back his pawn. But now we see that the queen is on the e-file. The king is on the e-file. How do we exploit this? Well, it's pretty simple. We move the rook to the e-file. And now, black is forced to play queen takes e1, queen takes e1 check, or something along those lines. He's down a queen. A queen position is best described as terror bad. Okay. Next example. This position arises in the opera game, a favourite game between Paul Morphy and some royal family members. I can't remember their names, unfortunately. It's white to play here. Well, what you should have noticed is that this knight is actually in a pin. Imagine if there was a position where this knight didn't exist. But white would simply play rook to d8. Not from e4. He'd play rook d1 to e8. And with the defense of the bishop, we see that this rank is covered, this square is covered, this square is covered. It's checkmate. Black's played a king sacrifice if he gives up this this knight. So how do we get rid of that knight? Well, the answer might surprise you, and of course Paul Morphy found it. White plays queen to b8, check. And now, after knight takes b8, rook d8 is checkmate. Okay, so for the final example, I'd like to also demonstrate that though this has been covered under the knife to the face lesson, which is a tactics lesson, it's worth noting that pins aren't always tactical considerations. Sometimes they're strategical. Going back to our good old Rio Lopez, bishop b5 here. One of the old moves is to play d6. Black's moving into a pin. It's called the Steinitz variation, and it's named after the first world champion, Wilhelm Steinitz. Black's moving into a pin. But white, if you can look and look as hard as you want here, but there's nothing white can do to claim an immediate victory. White is pinning black, but is not winning black. So that's just the last thing I'd like to look at. So I'd like to thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that those of you who didn't know what the pin was, or were unclear as to the value of a pin, now know a bit more. So once again, thank you for watching this video, and see you next time.